remind ourselves that Isaiah was living and prophesying at a time when there were some moral ups and downs, religious ups and downs in the nation. He served, his prophecy, his life, Isaiah's life took place during the time of about 5 kings of Israel, and near the end of Judah, and near the end of his life, he served under Hezekiah and Manasseh. Now Hezekiah was a pretty good king, considering the kings of that time, and then and Manasseh instituted a lot of really good reforms. But then Manasseh was about as bad as you could get. And so the culture really, the religious culture really declined, I'm sure, because there's a tendency for people, particularly in those old world countries, for the people to just pretty much fall in line with the leadership. Not so much in countries where there's where people have some control, but in those in that era, people didn't have control. They was just kind of following. They had to fall in line with the leadership, and so you can imagine going from a good king to a really bad king. You can imagine how the moral turpitude of the country dropped off. And you can imagine how that Isaiah probably felt like he was in the great minority when he was preaching and teaching and giving these the prophecies. Now, chapter 53, just to review a little bit, chapter 53 was a chapter that dealt with we might say with Calvary. Calvary. The cross, the suffering of the Messiah. Chapter 54 has to do with the growing of this new kingdom, the new covenant, the expansion of it. Chapter 55 is a chapter that deals with the invitation to not only the Jews, but to all of mankind, all the Gentiles, all of mankind, an invitation with regard to the Messiah. And it starts out that way. Listen up. Give me your attention. Everyone that thirsteth. Well, there's an invitation here. Now, scholars have identified this chapter. They've framed this chapter. They've put a label on this chapter. Some of them identify it as the universal invitation. Others have said, well, this chapter ought to be labeled God's grace to the Jews first and then to the Gentiles. Others have said, it's the call of the Gentiles. The call is issued to the Gentile world. Other scholars have identified this chapter as a free mercy to all. Now, when we talk about free mercy to all, how would that be limited? Free mercy to all. Does that mean everybody's going to get mercy? So it would, isn't that it indicated? It's a conditional mercy, right? It's conditioned upon acceptance and conditional upon obedience. There's a view there's a view in this country, there's a view probably in all the world, that in Christendom, in the broad sense of the Christian faith, there's a sense that, God's grace is it's unconditional. If you listen to people, you're at events where somebody has died. The idea is presented that regardless of how a person lived, and I've noticed this among politicians, they talk about, well, he's in heaven looking down because there's that mercy, that grace. But when you know those politicians and those people, they really weren't concerned about salvation. They weren't really concerned about obedience. But there's that idea that, God's invitation, and thus his grace, is unconditional. It's just, here it is, everybody, regardless of whether or not they're obedient. What's that mean? Ho. King, is there another translation that has a different word from ho? Pardon me?
Come everyone who thirsts.
Come everyone. Okay. Ho. Everyone that thirsteth. Now, just right out of the chute here, does that sound like anything in the New Testament? Matthew 5:6. Someone read Jesus' words. Matthew 5:6. Just as.
Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied.
Okay. Jesus may have had in mind this verse from Isaiah. Ho, everyone that thirsteth, come ye to the waters, and he that hath no money, come ye buy and eat. Yea, come buy wine and milk without money and without price. Now, in this verse, there's a lot of instruction. Come ye, let's read that again. Everyone that thirsteth, come ye to the waters, and he that hath no money, come ye to buy and eat. Yea, come buy wine, milk without money and without price. Now, how much does it cost? How much does it cost in money to deal with or to come into a covenant relationship with God? What's the purchase price? Well, that's a no-brainer. You can't buy it. And this is clarifying that. Come ye to the waters, and he that hath no money, you can buy and you can eat. And you can buy wine and milk without money and without price. Now, hear this. What's the idea of this? Water and wine and milk. What's that's a metaphor for something. What's the something?
Satisfaction.
Pardon me?
Satisfaction.
Okay. But these material, these things that are sustaining to the physical body, Is he talking about the physical body here? The physical? What's he talking about? These are symbols for spiritual maintenance, right? Not physical maintenance. It's metaphorical here. You can come and buy wine. You can get these spiritual blessings even though, there's nothing materially you can provide or give to secure these spiritual blessings. Wherefore, in verse 2, wherefore you do spend money. Now, I don't know whether, Isaiah presented this, these words to his contemporaries. I don't know whether this was a sermon, could have been, but probably there wouldn't have been much understanding of it. But wherefore do you spend money for that which is not bread, and ye labor for that which satisfieth not? Hearken diligently unto me. Now, what's it mean there when you spend money for that which is not bread? People spend money for lots of things, right? In the material world. Lots of possessions, lots of things. Well, you say, the sense here is that you use your resources for things that are not spiritually significant, not spiritually in value. So you spend money for that which is not bread, bread in the sense of a spiritual endeavor, and you labor for that which satisfieth not. Now, then, what's the answer to that? Hearken diligently unto me, and eat ye that which is good, and let your soul delight itself in fatness. Now, notice that you let your soul delight itself in fatness. Now, to what extent can one, with worldly possessions, to what extent can one be satisfied? Read the paper. Listen to the radio. Watch the television. And you see people that are rich and famous, right? Are they satisfied? How do we know they're not satisfied? They're getting in trouble. Drugs, alcohol, lots of other things that denigrate humankind. Overdose. Now, you playing out before the world is in our country at this point in time. It is a situation where people are being sent to jail for, important people that are the very top, the pinnacle of political influence. They're right there at the epicenter of the power in the government of the United States. And it's what's happening to some of them. We don't need to detail that. You read the papers, you watch television, you see that. So Isaiah is saying here that essentially people spend their time and their money on the wrong things. Now, verse 3. Incline thine ear, and come unto me, and hear. Your soul shall live, and I will make an everlasting covenant with you, even the sure mercies of David. Now, here it's almost like God is pleading with mankind. Incline your ear, and come unto me, hear, and your soul shall live, and I will make an everlasting covenant with you, even the sure mercies of David. Now, why does Isaiah invoke David here? Let's go over to the second chapter of Acts for just a moment, where Peter, in the midst of Peter's sermon on the day of Pentecost, as the church doors were opened for the first time, in the second chapter, beginning with the 25th verse. Let's begin with the 24th verse. Whom God hath raised up, having loosed the pains of death, because it was not possible that he should be holden of it. For David speaketh concerning him, I saw the Lord always before my face, for he is on my right hand, that I should not be moved. Therefore did my heart rejoice, and my tongue was glad. Moreover also my flesh shall rest in hope, because thou wilt not leave my soul in hell, neither wilt thou suffer thine Holy One to see corruption. Thou hast made known to me the ways of life. Thou shalt make me full of joy with thy countenance. Men and brethren, now he's already talked about here the Messiah. Men and brethren, let me speak freely unto you of the patriarch David, that he is both dead and buried, and his sepulchre is with us unto this day. Therefore, being a prophet, that is David, and knowing that God has sworn with him an oath to him that of the fruit of his loins, according to the flesh, he would raise up Christ to be on his throne. He, seeing this before, spake of the resurrection of Christ, that his soul was not left in hell, neither did his flesh see corruption. This Jesus hath God raised up, whereof we are all witnesses. So, where some people, interpret this to say that, God's, that there will be a restoration at some point in time, a restoration of David's throne. But the seed of David, that is the Messiah, where is his throne? Jerusalem or someplace else? Obviously it's not in Jerusalem. But there's a misunderstanding among a lot of religious people that David's throne in Jerusalem is going to be restored. That's not going to happen. Because where is Jesus currently? At the right hand of God, on the throne connected with the new covenant. So, when he talked about the sure mercies of David, he's referencing here the mercies extended by the Messiah, whose throne is in heaven and not in Jerusalem. Behold, in verse 4, behold, I have given him for a witness to the people, a leader and a commander to the people. Can you see why some of the Jews might have thought that Jesus, the Messiah, was going to be some kind of a warrior, some kind of a leader on earth? See this language of commander, the language of King James uses the word leader, the words leader and commander to the people. Now, God here obviously speaking about the Messiah, and he is the leader and commander of what? Obviously, of the kingdom. The kingdom being the church, and we all know that. But there are a lot of religious people who don't understand that. Behold, in verse 5, behold, thou shalt call a nation that thou knowest not, and nations that know not thee shall run unto thee, because of the Lord thy God and the Holy One of Israel, for he hath glorified thee. That idea of the nations running to let's read that again. And nations that know not thee shall run unto thee, because the Lord thy God and thy Holy One of Israel, for he hath glorified thee. So what the sense that the nations would run into? How is that played out? We can look back from 2019 backward. How is that played out? How is that prophecy played out on the world stage? When we, Kathy's right on there. When we think of the Christian community, do we think of the Jews? Do we think of racial Jews when we think of the Christian community? When we think of the church, do we think that, well, that's a Jewish institution? Because at least currently, there are Messianic Jews, but the racial Jews would make up a very, very small part of the kingdom. I don't know whether there's any data on that, but the church is primarily a Gentile institution. Is that right? So, that's the idea here, that the prophecy, and this is prophesied. I wonder how this could be prophesied. How did God know that the Jews, his chosen people, would be pretty much adverse to the Messiah? How did he know that? So, Isaiah, God, through Isaiah here, predicted that it would be the the nations, the Gentiles that would primarily make up the kingdom. Behold, thou shalt call a nation that thou hast not known, and nations that knew not thee shall run unto thee, because of the Lord thy God, and for the Holy One of Israel, for he hath glorified thee. Now then, in beginning with verse 6, we have here a sense of urgency. Beginning in verse 6. Here's the urgency. Seek ye the Lord while he may be found. Now, seek while he may be found. What's the problem of not seeking urgently? Because there's that phrase, when he may be found. Steve. Steve, we got his phone out there. Thank you. Say that again. The Messianic Jewish
congregation, according to the internet, is 350,000 people worldwide. And the world is what, 7 billion people?
Now I'm glad you Googled that or whatever you did to get it. But that gives us, that kind of confirms what we said a while ago. Very, very small part of the Christian, in terms of the broad Christian community. Let's think of the broad Christian community. How many members of the New Testament church are there worldwide? Mark, how many is there? Well, in the United States, there's let's say there's 1.5 million members of the church in the United States. I've read there's a comparable number in India. Megan, Luke, how many in Peru? How many? Well, you've been there, you should know. You just got back. So 350,000, if that data is correct, 350,000 compared to multiplied millions of people who worldwide subscribe to some form of the Christian community. So there's that the Gentiles certainly have run to this this messianic covenant, and then going back to verse 6, seek ye the Lord while he may be found. Now, there's an imperative here. Seek. And then call ye upon him when he's near. Again, that idea that this is an urgent call while he's near, because what's the implication? Pardon me? Yeah, there's an urgency about this. Now, in verse 7, let the wicked forsake his way. Another imperative. Let the bad, the sinful people forsake that way. And the unrighteous man, his thoughts, and let him, again, an imperative, return. Let him return, and he will have mercy upon him, and to our God he will abundantly pardon. Now, how far does God's mercy extend? What's the scope of God's mercy?
It's limited to those who accept it.
It's limited, it's conditional, as we've said here. It's conditional. When it's interesting to me that when people get involved in things that they shouldn't be involved in, and when churches doctrinally depart from the Scripture, they start to invoke God's mercy. Okay? They start to invoke God's grace as though it'll be okay to depart from doctrine. It's okay to be doing things that are not scriptural. I have some personal examples of that, even really close to home, but somebody would figure out, maybe would make some connections. Seek ye the Lord while he may be found. Call, and then forsake, and then return, and he will abundantly pardon. In verse 8, kind of starting another thought, and the things that are here, he's going into things here that are well known in the Christian community, well known among us. For my thoughts are not your thoughts. I wonder why, in the context of what he's been talking about here, I wonder why he would start into this idea of my thoughts are not your thoughts. God speaking here now. That kind of reminds us of Jeremiah. Some things he said in the 10th chapter, 23rd verse of Jeremiah. But I wonder why the prophet now devolves or moves over to this idea that for my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither your ways my ways. I wonder why he goes into that discussion. Now he's already talked about the mercy, the call. He's talked about the urgency of the call, the urgency of the invitation, and then he says, for your thoughts are not my thoughts. My thoughts are not your thoughts. I wonder why he makes that transition. Do you?
Because God has set a course, has told us how he wants things done, but as humans, we always veer off every year, and by the time you get down the road, you're so far off course that your thoughts are not his thoughts.
Yeah. He's probably thinking, well, now, humankind's going to have a hard time grasping these concepts. And so he says, my thoughts are not your thoughts. And it's kind of like, you need to accept what I'm saying. Don't overanalyze this stuff. Accept it. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways. saith the Lord. Now, why in the world would humankind need to be reminded of this? What's the atheist, after the atheist has thought about these things for a long time, maybe, he comes to the conclusion that there's no God. Now, there are those who have attended this congregation have come to the conclusion that there's no God. There are prominent families in the brotherhood that have children who have come to the conclusion that there's no God. That their parents are just kind of dumb. Right? What the atheist thinks of religious people as being what? Gullible, naive, maybe even stupid. Okay? And so mankind needs to be reminded that God's thoughts are not human thoughts. You need to be reminded that in verse 9, for as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. Now, are all of God's law, in our feeble minds, are all of God's directions, do we like all of God's directions? Is there a chance that we might not like some of God's directions? Is there? You know, somebody might say under your breath, yeah, there are some that, I don't know about this one, right? and so the idea here is, God is saying, human beings, humankind might come to the conclusion that I don't know what I'm talking about. God doesn't know what he's talking about. Well, he does know what he's talking about, and he says, for as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways. Paul said that the Greeks sought after what? Wisdom, right? And he said that there's something about the foolishness of preaching, you see. That there would be those that would consider preaching the Scripture, the Bible, being foolishness. Well, this is a warning against people thinking themselves out of a relationship with God. My ways are higher than your ways. My ways, the heavens are, just as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. For the rain cometh down, in verse 10 there, for the rain cometh down, and the snow from heaven, and returneth not thither, but watereth the earth, and maketh it bring forth and bud, that it may give seed to the sower, and bread to the eater. Now, what does that have to do with anything here? I mean, so shall my word be that goeth forth out of my mouth. It shall not return unto me void, but it shall accomplish that which I please, and it shall prosper in the thing wherein I send it. But look at that. Right? His word shall not be returned to me void or empty. I please that which I please, and it shall prosper in the thing whereunto I send it. Now, this idea that it's not going to return to him void. When somebody's preaching or somebody's teaching, the student oftentimes rejects that which is being taught, right? So what does it mean here that his word's not going to be is not going to return to him empty? What does we know that in any given data set of people, there are going to be those that reject. Now, what's the idea here that the word's not going to return into him void or empty? Marcy.
Just as there's growth from rain, you're going to have growth from other people.
Marcy is saying that just as there is this cycle, rain, and then just in that natural cycle, you're saying then that the cycle of God's word is going to come back and be according to his purpose. So, can somebody give some further illumination on that idea? And whether you obey it or not, his purpose is going to be accomplished, which is the sense that Isaiah is giving here. For ye shall go out with joy and be led forth with peace. Now, here's the end result of being associated with the kingdom. For ye shall go out with joy and be led forth with peace. The mountains and the hills shall break forth before you into singing, and all the trees of the field shall clap their hands. What's the sense that's being conveyed here? Great blessings, great joy, great comfort in the kingdom, in the new covenant world. And we'll pick up there next week.